Here it is. This is the Catalyst 9800L series wireless controller from Cisco. And guys, just like I do all the time on this channel, I want to give you guys a really good overview of what this box is, what it's replacing, what it can do, show you guys all the physical connectivity that's on it on the front and on the back, and then take you through setting this thing up out of the box. So you get it out of the box, plugging it in. I want to be able to get an access point associated to it. I want to get some clients running on this box and show you guys how easy the setup actually is of this thing. I'm also going to talk about a couple things that I found, we'll call it interesting, maybe some not very well documented features or quirks of the box. So you're going to want to pay attention to those while you're setting this thing up, and let's jump to it. Okay, so guys, let's talk a little bit about this box. What is it and what can it do? So this box is actually replacing, or I guess the next controller in line on those small form factor wireless LAN controllers that Cisco's had out for a really long time. So we had the 2504, we had the 3504, and this is kind of the next generation of those, being the 9800L. It's been beefed up a little bit here, so it's going to be able to do 250 access points now. You're also going to be able to have 5,000 clients on this thing, and the throughput is up to 5 gigabits per second on this. As you guys kind of heard me mention in the beginning of this video, it's a Catalyst wireless LAN controller now. And it's a Catalyst wireless LAN controller because it no longer runs Air OS software anymore. So these are the first generation of standalone controllers that are actually running iOS software on them. So it was really nice setting this thing up and getting it out of the box. And when I got to the CLI configuration of it, I knew what to do straight out of the box because it's all iOS-based commands. So if you've ever set up a Cisco switch or a Cisco router before, getting into it, trying to figure out what's going on is super, super simple. So I'm really glad that we finally standardized on that iOS software code across multiple platforms now, because it makes my job a lot easier. This thing, just like a lot of the other Catalyst 9000 series switches we have, so the 9300s and above, this can do encrypted traffic analytics. So what that is if there's a user's PC that's misbehaving and they may have a piece of malware or something on it, and that traffic is going through my wireless, I could actually take a look at that traffic without decrypting it, send it over to StealthWatch, and StealthWatch can tell me that, hey, you may have some malicious behavior on your wireless network. It looks like this host has been compromised. So this box fully falls in line with that. The encrypted traffic analytics has been huge on the Catalyst 9300 series switches that we've been selling. So again, awesome that Cisco put this in here. Really great feature. This controller is also SD access compatible. So if you guys are thinking about doing software-defined access on your LAN, you can add the controller in here and it'll be part of your fabric. If you're not ready for software-defined access yet, then you can still run this thing in traditional wireless mode, CapWAP mode, tunnel of traffic through this thing if you guys wanted to. You know, nothing changes from the old behavior to the new behavior here. We can do high availability, so this thing does have a service port on it. You could hook up another 9800 series controller next to it, and you can do high availability with it. And then the last thing on here that I thought was worth mentioning is hot patches. So since I have iOS code on here, if there's a software update that comes out, I need to load something in here new. Let's say it's a new access point model that we just came out with. I don't have to upgrade this entire box. I can just load a hot patch, and now the new 9000X access point is going to work on here without having to even reboot the controller or anything like that. I will mention, before we get into showing you guys the physical ports and everything on this, that there is no longer power over Ethernet on this box. So you guys might remember the PoE feature from the 2500s and the 3500s. Cisco did away with that with this box, and at first I was like, oh no, I don't know if that's the right idea, but getting into this box a little bit more, understanding the roadmap where Cisco's going, I'm okay with it. And I'm okay with it because we have that Mobility Express solution now on our access points. So for a small network where traditionally I would just plug them into the controller here, I don't even need a controller anymore. I can just have 3 or 4 access points out at a remote office, And one of the access points can actually act as the controller. That's that Mobility Express solution there. So knowing that we have that, I don't have to go and say, well, you want 4 or 5 access points in there. You really should look at a controller out there. You don't need this anymore for those really small networks. You just need the Mobility Express solution. So with that, let's get into the ports, and we'll talk about those a little bit. So first we'll start on the power supply side of this thing. Nothing really too crazy on this side, just the Kensington lock cutout right there, and then you've got the power connector right here. So that's really it. Nothing really on the side, just a bunch of ventilation holes, and that's kind of it. Now I'm going to flip it, and we're going to take a look at the port side. Okay, so let's take a look at the port side of this box, and we'll go over everything that's on here. So starting on this side over here, we've got the reset button, pretty standard on these small form factor boxes. Hold it down for 10 seconds while the thing's booted, and you'll get a factory reset of the box. Next to that, we've got your traditional power on status light there. So once that's plugged in and everything, you'll see that go green. Next to that, we have a little bell, and this is an alarm bell telling you that you guys have a fault or a hardware issue going on with the box. And next to that is your redundancy port light, so that'll light up when the box is in high availability mode, and you've got another wireless LAN controller plugged into the RP port. Okay, so first kind of quirk of this box, or not very well documented feature we'll call it, is this little bell here actually lights up red when you plug the box in for the first time if you don't have your uplink ports, these 2 ports here, plugged in. So I guess the reasoning for that is it's telling you that, hey, you've got a fault because you don't have your 2 uplinks plugged in. But if you're not using these uplink ports because you're using these other 4 ports over here, your light's going to be red, and you can go in and disable those ports and get rid of that. But, me not really knowing much about this box, I thought I had a bad box out of the box because I'm looking at this thing saying, okay, well, I've got a red warning light on and I haven't even done anything yet. So guys, just watch out for that. It doesn't mean you have a bad box. It just means that your uplinks aren't plugged in. Next, we have our 4 Ethernet ports here, and these are MGig ports, so they're those multi-gigabit Ethernet ports, and they'll do up to 2.5 gigs. Again, like I mentioned before, no power over Ethernet on this, so they're just regular RJ45 data ports. Next to that, these are my 2 10 gig uplink ports. Now, I've got this box that's copper. There is another flavor of this box that comes in where these can be SFP ports. So if you don't have 10 gig copper, you can get the SFP version of this, and you can run fiber with SFPs between this box and your core. You can do that, or if you just have a really long run and you need fiber, you've got that uplink option right there. Next to that, we have the USB port. That's your traditional USB port for doing software upgrades. So you could put a piece of software on a thumb drive, pop it in there, go into the CLI, load it right off the USB stick in there. Next to that, we have the console ports. You've got your traditional old school console port at the top, and then you've got your micro USB port on the bottom. That's pretty cool. This is the first time I've seen Cisco actually use a micro USB port. Traditionally, it's been the mini USB port, so they finally went over to the micro USB port on that. And one other interesting fact on these 2 ports here while I was reading some of the documentation is that only one of these ports is active at any given time. And if you have something plugged into the micro USB port, that takes precedence over the top cable here. So just watch out for that if you've got this thing cabled up differently, or you've got both of these things plugged in. Only one is going to be active at any given time. Next to that, we have the service port at the top. So that is actually your out-of-band management port. And then under that, we have your RP port. And again, that's for your redundancy port. If you did want to run this in high availability, you put another controller next to it, you connect these 2 together, and then you've got high availability on this. So with that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to power on this box, and I'm going to show you guys how to get this thing configured. Now, when you power on this box, here's the second kind of quirk or undocumented feature. It is loud, and the fan on this thing blasts at, I guess, 100% all the time. So when I originally got this thing and I had that red warning light on and the fan's going crazy, again, I thought, okay, is my box a DOA? Should I RMA this thing? But that's the way this thing was designed. So it needs, I guess, all that cooling in here. Typically these smaller boxes, if they have fans at all, they're really light and you barely hear them. This thing you're going to hear. So you probably want to put it in a rack somewhere. You probably want to put it behind closed doors. You're not going to want to put it under your PC or anything like that. So I'll plug it in, unless you guys listen to the fan. Hopefully it comes through okay on the microphone. But just, again, word of caution, something to watch out for. All right, so before we get into the configuration, just figured I'd show you guys the fan in this thing spinning. So I'm about a foot away from the microphone, and I've got the controller about a foot away from the microphone on the table here. So, I don't know how well it's coming through on the mic, but it is fairly loud. It depends on your definition of loud, but it does make some noise. It's not going to be super whisper quiet or anything like that. You can also see here I don't have anything plugged in right now to any of these ports, and I have that little red bell warning light that's active. So again, don't worry about it. It's a little bit noisy and you get that bell, but again, we can show you guys how to shut that bell off at least. Okay guys, so to start configuring this controller out of the box, you have to start in the CLI. I looked around, I tried to figure out a way if you could just go straight into the GUI. And there's not really a way to do that. You need to start in the CLI. There's only a couple things you need to do in here, and then we can transition directly over to the GUI. So when you plug it in, console into this box, you're going to get the initial configuration dialog pop up here, and we just need to say yes. And we're going to go through here. Would you like to do basic management setup? Yes, we would. Enter the host name of the wireless LAN controller. We'll call it test WLC for time being here. Enable secret. Put in your super secret passwords here. And would you like to set up account for accessing HTTP server? So you guys need to say yes to this because this basically allows us to GUI into the box. So you need to set up the box as an HTTP server. So we're going to say yes to that. Username, admin, fine for me. Password, Cisco, fine for me. You can change these obviously if you want, and I recommend you change them, but for testing purposes, I'm going to leave them the same. SNMP right now, I'm not going to configure that, so we're going to skip over that. And then, here's one of those interesting points that you got to configure in here as well. So right now it's asking, so what management network do you want to use from the above interfaces? So what I'm going to select, and the way that I have my box plugged in right now is I have one port, my out-of-band management port or that service port, plugged in directly to my laptop, and that's actually gigabit Ethernet 0 here. And I'm going to use that for my initial configuration, my initial out-of-band management. So I'm going to put in, right now, we're going to put in the gigabit Ethernet 0 port. And you have to type this all in. You can't just do gig, tab or whatever. It won't pop in for you. So you have to put gigabit Ethernet 0 or whatever interface you want to configure on it. And then you need to configure an IP address for it so that way you guys can actually plug in. And we're going to say, yes, we want to configure the IP address. And we'll pop that in real quick. 40.5 we'll go with. Subnet mask, we're just going to leave it /24, and it builds out the initial configuration for you, shows you the quick summary of what you did, and then you can press 2 to save the configuration, and we're going to do that. And that's it. We're into the box. So from here, we're pretty much done with getting into the CLI. I might come back here to show you guys a couple things, but to getting the initial setup of this box, you're done. So now we could transition over to the GUI and show you guys what that looks like. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to try to log into this thing via the GUI. So I'm going to go into my LAN settings, and I'm just going to set a static IP address here on the same subnet, 92.168.40.83 we'll call it, and we'll hit apply. And now we'll try to HTTPS into our box here. .40.5. And typical security warning, advanced, proceed. And we log into our box via the GUI. Admin, Cisco is our password for testing purposes. And now we can go through the, what they call express setup. I would have thought express setup means plug in and you get this page originally, but this is I guess, step 2 of the express setup. And you can go in here and you could add in some of your information. So we're going to do standalone for right now. I'm not going to worry about high availability at this point. Date and time. If you want to put an NTP server in here, you can put an NTP server in here. Service port, that is our out-of-band management port. We set that in the CLI. And then we need to come down here and we need to set our wireless management settings. So guys, in AirOS, this is the AP manager. So this is basically how the access point is going to communicate with our controller over what port and everything. So right now, I've plugged in my box using the 0 port 0 on the front of the box, and that goes to my switch. Now on my switch, I have DHCP set up. I've got my default gateways all set up. So what we're going to be doing is just dumping traffic from the access point onto the switch from this port here. So I'm going to select that again because that's the port that I have from my controller to my switch. We need to designate a IP address for this. So we're going to use 192.168.50.5 we'll use on this guy. Actually, we'll use a different one. I think I used 5 up already. It's something else. And 255.255.255.0. And we got to put the VLAN number in here too. So we're going to have this running on VLAN 1. Put in our default gateway. 50.2. And that's it. That's all we need in here to get this thing initially set up. We're going to hit next. And we're going to create our first wireless network. We're going to say, yep, it's WPA2 personal. You also have your enterprise options if you're going to be using 802.1x and radius server. But for just to keep this thing easy, I'm just going to use a pre-shared key. We're going to call it test SSID. And pre-shared key Cisco 123, and you could do a little eyeball thing there and it'll tell you what the password was while you're typing it there. We're going to go ahead and click add. Click next. And here's some kind of advanced settings you could do here. So we can just do typical client density if you wanted to. I'm not going to go too much in depth on what this does. There's a lot of new features in this controller too, and it looks a little bit different than AirOS. There's a concept of profiles and tags and all that. I'm not going to get into that. Maybe I'll make a more advanced video, but the real purpose of this video, guys, here is just to show you guys how to get this thing up and running, get an SSID on it, and get clients associated to it. You know, these little wins just to get you guys going, and then you can start looking into this thing, start reading more documentation on, okay, how should I be setting this thing up? What should I be doing with this? We're going to set it for data and voice, typical traffic. We've got that virtual IP address in here. That hasn't really changed. That's just for things like the splash page pops up if a guest comes in, things like that. We'll use that virtual IP address. And we're going to just say summary on this. You can take a look again at the settings we made. There's our test SSID, advanced settings, and we're going to go ahead and hit finish here. Are you sure you want to proceed? Yes. Now I'm going to go and plug my access point in and let this thing do its thing for a second here, and we'll take a look again and we'll log right back in. Okay, so guys, I just plugged my access point in, and the way that I have this set up is I have my access point and controller on the same layer 2 subnet, so the AP can find the controller very easily. If you guys don't have that situation and you've got your access point on a different subnet, you can use DNS, you can use DHCP options, so that way the access point knows where that AP manager address is to find the actual controller. So we can log in here first, and we could take a look to make sure that the AP was actually associated to the controller. and we see the brand new iOS GUI here, and we can see that our access point is there. So, at this point, I should be able to join my network that I created. And if you take a look at my wireless settings here, I've got my test SSID. I go ahead and click that, and it tells me cannot be joined. Okay. So this is one of those things that I ran into after initially configuring this and kind of banged my head against the wall a little bit and was like, well, why isn't this working? And what I figured out is I had to come in here under configuration, go to policy. And again, guys, this is a lot different than the way that Air OS worked and everything, just the way that the screens are. Click on your default policy. I'll make an advanced video maybe talking about policies, profiles, tags, all that stuff and how this stuff works. But basically, we need to go in here under access policies, and for some reason, I don't know, again, if this is a bug, maybe I'm doing something wrong, but when we put in there to use VLAN 1, what actually got put in here is VLAN 0001. So it's using a VLAN name for some reason. I'm not really sure why. I could either click this and hit the default, which actually will call the default profile for this, which if you look at the default profile for it, it'll say VLAN 1, or you can just type in 1. It really doesn't matter. Again, I'm not going to go too much in depth into that. I want to try to make this video as short as possible, and hit apply, update there. So now that's getting applied, and if we try to go to our test SSID again, we should be able to associate to it. And we'll give it a second, and we are on it. Now we'll test our favorite websites here. We'll go to Yahoo, and we are up and running. And one last thing I'm going to show you guys inside the GUI here is just on the licensing side of things. Let's get this working here too. So if we go over to administration, licensing, this is all smart licensing. So you guys need to make sure you have your smart licensing portal working. And we're going to go in here and we're going to configure this. So I need to actually go to software.cisco.com and create a token here. So if you go here, and we're going to go over to smart licensing, log in here, and I am going to go ahead and create a new token, and max number of uses, we're going to put 1 here. And this token is what's actually going to link the wireless LAN controller to Cisco Smart Licensing. So I have that here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy the token. We're going to go back to our licensing page here, and we're going to set my source interface. So the only interface I have plugged in that's got capabilities of getting to the internet is that TW000 interface. And it needs a IP address for DNS. I mean, you could put in your DNS IP address here, or I just use Google because I'm lazy, I guess. And we'll hit next, pop the token in, and finish. This might take a couple minutes, I don't know, to go through. Okay, and then guys, once this comes back up, give it a minute. You can hit this reload button at the top there, and eventually it'll say, registered, smart licensing enabled, all that. And then the last thing I'm going to show to you guys is that red warning light on the box and what it looks like and why it's actually coming on. So if we do a command here, the show command for the alarm status, it'll actually tell us that severity is critical because these 2 links are down. So that's the reason that we're getting that alarm status that's on there. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, please, if you're not a subscriber, subscribe to the video. If you like what I'm doing here, give me a thumbs up. And if you guys have any other questions, want to talk about something, post it in the comments below, and I'll try to get back to you guys as soon as possible. Thanks a lot.